Right, to my right, we've got Professor Barry Barton, with probably the longest title I've seen, Professor of Law and Director of the Centre of Environmental Resources and Energy Law at the University of Waikato. Very impressive. Barry is co-author of a research report published in November last year, which many of you may have read. The report analyses the barriers to EV uptake, EV policy, and can encourage uptake. And also does a comparative analysis of what's going on overseas. So I'm very interested to hear what you've got to say, Barry. Welcome.
Thank you. My interests as a professor of law are in the legal components, the regulatory components, and the policy and exactly how we're making policy. So let me make a couple of comments from that perspective. I hope they hang together and don't ramble unduly. First of all, for what are our policy objectives? And this is relevant if we're asking government to do things, and if we're asking governments to use public money for one thing or another. What are our purposes? And one of them is energy security that goes with energy efficiency and sometimes gets forgotten. And it's a very important one. If we land up with a perfect storm of a crashing New Zealand dollar and escalating oil prices, then it could all be very uncomfortable for the country. And in that sense, I was actually quite disappointed that the Minister this morning didn't have an answer to the question about whether there was, well, he did have an answer, it was no, about the modelling. I would have thought that was one of the great selling points for electric vehicles or for efficiency progress. It is a way of de-risking the New Zealand economy or a company's accounts or individual things. So it'd be great to see better connections of that kind. The other main policy driver, of course, is climate change, and to my mind, it's an incredibly important one. Of our overall emissions in New Zealand, transport of all kinds is only about 17%, so it's not much, but it is one that is growing fast. And again, I find myself musing in the Minister's announcements of the EV policy, about a month ago. I would have expected to see some calculations there about the effects on New Zealand's emissions that his target of 64,000 would produce. Help us persuade people this is a good idea, and also please let's have policy that's joined up with other policy, in particular our overall climate change policy and the emissions trading scheme. So this is the sort of way that I think thinking about the context can pose questions about how we can improve what we do. And in relation to electric vehicles, what they could produce, well, the back of the envelope figures that a friend, Jonathan Lever, who some of you might know at Unitic, he suggested that 64,000 might produce a reduction of transport emissions by 1.1%. Now, that's not much, but it's a start. And in a way, I think one of our challenges is to ask how the enthusiasm and the intent and the commitment in the EVs area can be rolled out to other areas of activity, because it is quite extraordinary how much determination there is to bring about change in a field like this. That question of only 1.1%, I don't mean it as a belittling thing. It's a challenge to us. How can we take that higher? And what that has takes many people too in their thinking is that we must not lose sight of the fact that electric vehicles are vehicles. And the context that we need to put these things in is one of transport and transport policy as a whole. And I think that is the best way to think of getting clarity and good results about where we want this to contribute with what we want to see happen in our country. And many people have commented on the significance of public transport in a way that is complementary to efforts on EVs. I would add active transport, cycling and pedestrian. The best way of thinking about it that I have seen is the three words: avoid, shift, improve. So avoid is how can you build cities that require less kilometres to be travelled, fewer trips. Shift is to shift from one mode of transport to a better one, how to get more people enthusiastic about buses and trains, how to get people willing to go cycling, and improve. So of the various modes that we have, how to improve the way they perform. The work that one does in policy takes one to read quite a lot of the literature that is out there about what makes some countries successful about EVs and other countries not so successful. So it was really good to hear from Christina in relation to Norway and David in relation to BC. We can learn a lot from situations like that. We can also learn a lot from the countries which have put quite impressive subsidies out there, but without any bite, without any nibbles on them. The UK is an example of that. Remember the United Kingdom? What we learn, for example, from international literature, and it's not me really. That there's just a lot of studies done in Europe, in the United States, and Canada, with a fairly consistent story. And one of the messages that they keep saying is that price does matter, and there's no getting away from it. Yes, we might be coming to a magic convergence point at some stage. I hope we do, but let's not fool ourselves. Price does matter. And we need to build policy instruments that are direct about that. For example, we know from a number of different studies that what matters is the price on the day. So do I get a rebate that shows as a great big subtraction from the overall cost that the dealer is presenting to me? People are just, retail people in particular are just not impressed by the total lifetime cost, total cost of ownership calculations. They know about it, but for a lot of people it doesn't do the job. And that includes, as I understand it from some of the studies, in the commercial field as well. So your customers, of course, will be far more astute and commercially intelligent people. Yeah. So I don't want to overstate it, but it's an issue, and it needs to. And if we're to devise policies that will work, we need to deal with those things. And so, what about the road user charges subsidy? And I'm going to call it that. I hadn't thought of it up to now, but that's what it is. It is a subsidy, and if we have spokespersons saying that we don't use the tax system that way, well, maybe we don't use the income tax system that way, but we are certainly using the road user charges system to remove a cost for a service that is used by EV users as much as any other users. So it's worth so much over 5 years. Well, to a lot of people that doesn't mean much, and it is unlikely to change their purchasing behaviours. So we should choose policy instruments that will affect behaviour. That's what we're trying to do. And a host of other things you can do about devising measures that will be more effective than other measures, and we should listen to that. And we should not think that New Zealand is special, which sometimes we hear that, well, it's all very good for North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Africa, but New Zealand is different. So we should be cool about such arguments. The other thing I'd point out is that pretty well every country in the world sells cars under fuel efficiency standards of one kind or another. It's really only Australia and New Zealand that don't. Even Saudi Arabia is introducing fuel efficiency standards, and that imposes pressure on the composition of the vehicle fleet. And in some countries, and in California in particular, it's been incredibly effective over 40 or 50 years. Chelsea would know much more about it than I do. It works. It influences the types of cars that people will import and try to put on the market in New Zealand. And if we're trying to encourage EVs without looking at that, then we're trying to encourage EVs into a headwind. And also it is forgetting the rest of the vehicle fleet. So, we bring in about 250,000 cars a year, so it is good to be thinking about the 1,000 odd that will be EVs, but we really ought also to think about the other 249,000, and something about fuel efficiency standards will do that. But they will also make EVs look a whole lot more attractive to a lot of purchasers. So anyway, there's just a couple of thoughts about the things that one learns about from the literature about what appears to be sound, effective policy that will do the job, and the avoidance of blind alleys that won't. Thanks.